Hello everyone. I'm Amina Slimani. Today I will be hosting one of the characters so well known to Sahrawi people. Welcome and thanks about your time, Catherine.
Thank you. It's an honor to join you.
Thank you so much. Our topic today is the role and importance of solidarity movements in liberating Western Sahara. Catherine Constantinides is a prominent South African thought leader, environmentalist focused on climate change, food and water security, as she is a social justice and activist and human rights defender. In addition to defending various just causes, you are one of the staunchest advocates of Western Sahara issue by describing the territory as the last remaining colony in Africa and as an African state in exile. Catherine, do you want to add anything about you that I did not mention?
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much for the opportunity to chat to you, Amina. I'm grateful for the introduction. I would just say that as a South African and as an African on the other end of the continent, and with the history that we have, it is my absolute responsibility and my determination that in my lifetime, the Sahrawi people will receive their freedom, justice will prevail, and it is our duty as young African leaders to ensure that the Sahrawi people are not forgotten, that we take them with us as we move forward in building our continent. And Africa can never be a continent that can challenge the many problems that we have if we have not solved decolonization on the continent, if we have not addressed occupation on the continent. And the Sahrawi people deserve much more attention and prominence on the agenda of Africa.
Exactly. Thank you. That's right. Thank you. As we all know, Western Sahara issue is not well known to many people. How did you get involved in the Western Sahara case, and what or who introduced you to Western Sahara cause?
Amina, you know, one day I will have to take some time and write a book about this, because the strange reality is, like you say, I'm sad to say, but the truth is I did not know about the Western Sahara 10 years ago. Western Sahara came onto my radar because of the King of Morocco and an invitation I received from the Kingdom of Morocco to speak at a conference being hosted by the King in what was told to me to be Morocco, but it was in fact in occupied Western Sahara in Dakhla. And it is a really long story and it will have to go in a book one day, but it is in fact the King of Morocco that awakened the fact that there is an entire people north of my continent that have been forgotten. And once I went to the Sahrawi refugee camps for the first time in southwest Algeria, it was on that trip coming back home that I realized my life had changed forever. I could never leave behind what I had seen, what I had experienced, and now what I know to be the truth. And so from that day onwards, I will give my voice and platform to the Sahrawi people. And it must be said that Algeria as a country and as a partner on the continent have been an immense pride in ensuring that the Sahrawi people go with them to every platform, every engagement, and into every discussion. There has not been an Algerian diplomat anywhere in the world that does not talk about Western Sahara when given a platform. And so my work on Western Sahara has become a broad discussion of solidarity with those who have political will, understanding for freedom and justice, and have a fight within them to see that our brothers and sisters of Western Sahara also deserve the freedom that we have. And as a South African, I'm ashamed that more South Africans don't even know of this cause. It is not right that the Sahrawi people live behind a dark curtain that has been hung by the Moroccan kingdom to keep them away from the world.
Yeah, that's right. And I did not expect that the first time you know about the cause like this way. I thought that you did read about it or you joined an organization, but since that the King of Morocco himself made you aware about these facts, then that's good and bad at the same time.
Yeah.
thank you about that. And sure, if you will write a book, I'm sure that a lot of people will like to read it, especially Sahrawis people that they appreciate, really appreciate, and they are grateful about all the efforts that you are making in order to help them and in order to introduce the Sahrawi case in different occasions. My second question is, we are currently living in uncertain times because of COVID-19. A lot of initiatives have grown to halt, and large meetings are more difficult to organize. However, this also provides us an opportunity for change in how we cooperate. There has been a large increase in open seminars regarding this case of Western Sahara to the public. What's your view on the change after COVID-19 about Western Sahara issue?
I think your question is such an important one, because you are 100% correct. More people everywhere in the world are going online, spending time online, learning new things, trying to understand new things. And there have been wonderful activists around the world who are putting together wonderful webinars and seminars and discussions on Western Sahara. And we need to continue this. I think that this only strengthens the cause of Western Sahara, because you used a word earlier which is critically important, and we must not forget. Solidarity takes each and every one of us. It requires a collective effort in us moving forward and ensuring that we do everything we can to raise awareness on Western Sahara and to educate people. And I think that these webinars, online discussions, allow us this very opportunity. Education and awareness are the most important things that we can share with other people. You and I are people who understand this challenge. You and I are people who understand what is at stake here. But we need to use our platforms to share with the world the unjust system of Morocco and the occupation of an entire nation of people. And so I think coming out of COVID, at the end of this very dark journey, because we don't know where we're going, but when we do come out on the other end, what is certain is the fact that as Africans, we have had an opportunity to engage this topic far greater than we have before. And as a global community, we have had the opportunity to share because of technology. We've used that power to use that platform to educate and create awareness. The two most important things that we need to do as activists, no matter where in the world we are. So I think that this can only further strengthen solidarity internationally, and also the pressure that must continue to be put on our leaders also all over the world, but most specifically here in Africa, to do something and to ensure that the Sahrawi people's cause is not just one that is highlighted on important days or just at certain forums, but in between that, 365 days of the year, we're using the chance to give voice to a people who have not been done by the way that we should, the way that we have moved forward as a continent and a world, and we have forgotten the Sahrawis, along with a few other people and nations that have been forgotten. This must be something we must rectify, because it cannot be that in 2020 we live in a world where access to information is at our fingertips, where we can send people to the moon, and yet there is an entire nation of people that are still under occupation.
Yeah, that's suffering in 2020. But if we take a look on the subject from another side, with the increased violence against demonstrators around the world, how can we get the attention of the public in foreign countries to educate and to get interested in the cause of Western Sahara?
I think that as activists, this is a very big challenge, because unfortunately the reality is that in the region of Western Sahara, there is a ceasefire. So blood is not spilt, lives are not being lost, but the torture of the lives in occupied Western Sahara every single day, the torture of young men and women, elderly people, children, the abuse, the violation of human rights, the illegal detention of people, all of these things must be framed for every community in different ways. And so our role as activists and as supporters of a free Western Sahara have a challenge where we have to sit and think for our very communities, for the people that we speak to, how do we frame Western Sahara in a way that people can relate, people can understand and feel a link? That link may be very different for people in Algeria, very different for people in Uganda, and very different to people here in South Africa. So as activists, we have to design what that narrative is and how we can connect to our audience and how we are able to really express ourselves as a community of activists, as a community of, from a regional perspective. We have to give attention to that. And the reason that this is so important is because, as you've said, around the world, there have been movements that we have seen now during lockdown that have drawn the world's attention. And it is because of injustice, inequality. We have been drawn to the USA, where one life was lost because of a man, the color of a man's skin. Coming from a country where we had racial oppression in the most horrific way, this is something that for us as a country, we are able to relate to in such a huge way. But the same way that we have seen global outrage of what has happened in the USA, we need to feel the same kind of strength of solidarity for the people of Western Sahara. But that takes work on the ground. It takes activists constantly working, ensuring that we're constantly pushing out information, connecting people, creating awareness, finding ways to create campaigns, even if it's online campaigns, if it's once-off campaigns. It's a constant work and effort to ensure that we're creating an opportunity for the cause and justice to prevail on the issue of the Sahrawi people. And we need to remember that we have to take and engage the Sahrawi with us. I always say that the Sahrawi people are my second nation. And so we have to find ways that give them a platform to be the voice. And where we can't, we then become that voice. And we have an immense responsibility to do all that we can where we are. We don't have to go anywhere. Where we are in the corners of the world that we are, what are we doing as activists, and how do we hold ourselves accountable to do everything possible to push the platforms that we have, to educate the uneducated, to put pressure on leaders that they feel that pressure, that they feel the responsibility to do something, and that collectively the vision must always be self-determination for the people of Western Sahara.
Yeah, exactly. And if only one activist educate 10 people about the Western Sahara case, that will be enough as a beginning, because
Absolutely.
that's our goal. We want more people to know about it around the world, and I'm quite sure that when they will really know about the Western Sahara case, they will be in the side of Sahrawi people, sure, because the reality is clear. In my own experience, I have noticed a change in how people act with the current situation. Solidarity and compassion have become so much important these days, and I believe that aftermath of Corona may change people's mentality from me point to view of we. Are people more approachable for good after experiencing difficult situations like Corona, for example? Will they be more helpful, and will they start thinking as a community rather than what they were thinking? Like, I would think only about myself, since that this is not harming me. I don't care about the other nations. Do you think that this will really help?
You know, I think that this is such an interesting thing, because you're quite correct. This is a global pandemic that we're all affected by. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter where in the world you come from. It doesn't matter what your status is, what your title is within a corporate structure, a government structure. We're all susceptible and all vulnerable to this global pandemic, which is COVID-19. Having said that, we are all in this together. And so we feel a different sense of connectedness, because here is something that is not just affecting one person in one place, one country on one continent. It's something that affects all of us. So we're connected with the kinds of emotion we feel, the kind of connection we have with each other. And I truly do hope that coming out of COVID, there will be not a normal that we're used to. I hope that we will take great lessons out of this pain and struggle that we find ourselves in. The challenge of COVID-19 must be that we start to think as a collective, that we don't just focus on the individual. Like you have just said, it is so important that we understand we're stronger together. We are more determined when we have something that we're fighting for together. There is a strength in unity and a strength in solidarity. It doesn't matter if we're fighting a global pandemic or if we're fighting just to feed people on the streets of our very community. Because I think COVID has taught us so much about who we are as individuals, but more so about what we want to be as a community. And I know, coming from a South African context, living in Johannesburg, which is the biggest city in South Africa and one of the biggest cities in the continent, the pain and suffering of people during COVID-19 due to lockdown. Today is in fact day 101 of lockdown in South Africa. 101. I can't even believe it. But what we have seen is not just a pandemic that has started to spiral out of control, but we have seen people starve, people who cannot work and are hungry. We have seen poverty eat at the core of who we are. And so for me, the question is, what are we doing not only as individuals, but as a community? And this understanding must be something that we take and move out of COVID-19, and we start to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to live in? What kind of world do we want to be a part of when we move out of this global pandemic? This is an unprecedented time for any of us, but we have to be the ones that decide, who are we when we come out of this, and how are we stronger? Thinking more from a collective perspective, not just about individual interests as a community, as a country, as corporations, but as collectives. What are we thinking about? How are we joining hands to do things together in a world that has been constructed for us to operate in individual entities and silos? What are we going to do to be better individuals and better communities to come out of COVID-19? And it is with those answers that we'll be able to challenge the great problems that we have in our society, not just as my own country, not just as our continent of Africa, but as a global society. If we understand that this is something we're in together, that we're building a future that's for all of us, I really believe we'll be able to come out of this learning great lessons out of a time that has been dark, anxious, fearful, and very painful because of the loss of life and the suffering of people because of this pandemic.
Yes, exactly. And colonization is really a pandemic that Africa is suffering from since a long time. My next question is, there are a lot of great people inside Western Sahara, either occupied or unoccupied or refugee camps, or even people internationally helping with awareness and change at a local and national level. How can we work together in a synchronized way to achieve better results?
I really think that we need to understand that there are such wonderful initiatives, such wonderful people, remarkable individuals who we can learn from every single day. We need to, though, find better ways at working together. And I think it really links off of what I've just said also, that our collective effort is much stronger than the individual effort. But we have to use this time to think of strategy that allows us to work together better and more effectively moving forward, that allows for us to learn from each other. And ultimately, I would want to share that one thing we forget as human beings, and I don't know what it is, but we do forget it. By lighting another person's candle, we take nothing away from the light of our own. We only make the path moving forward so much brighter. It's for us to really understand that together, sharing resources, sharing information, sharing opportunity, platforms, we're able to light up a greater path that we all walk. And I think that that is something that we need to individually reflect on, because we need to go out and work better together only once we've understood ourselves and understood for ourselves what it is that we want to individually be the base of our value system. Because then we are able to move forward stronger, more united, and in a way that is able to be more efficient and productive.
Yes, and according to one of the comments, Morocco does not have any legal claim for Western Sahara, according to all international bodies. As we all know, Morocco is not so strong country that can colonize another country and go with that. I mean, it did not get any punishment internationally or anything. What do you think is the force that Morocco has that a lot of other countries keep silent this human rights violation in Western Sahara and this colonization? Sure, we know that France is responsible not only in indirect way but in a direct way about what's going on in Western Sahara. How can you describe the role of France in Western Sahara and in the colonization of Morocco? And how do you think that we can defend Western Sahara against Morocco, but against France too? As you know, you and me, we are Africans, and we know that France is the responsible about a lot of problems and colonization and suffering of the African continent.
Look, I think that this is an important question. It would go back to the fact that, unfortunately, France uses Morocco as a proxy into Africa. We have to be realistic about what is going on, the political role players, and actually the reality of what we see. And the fact that France uses Morocco as a proxy, they are the mouthpiece. And so they're the ones that hold all the cards. When we look at the United Nations Security Council, France has a permanent seat. That permanent seat gives them a veto vote. And that has been part of the biggest problem. The other thing that we must understand and not underestimate is that there is massive economic benefit for countries to turn a blind eye to Morocco and what is happening in Western Sahara. And unfortunately, we have lived in a world where ego, politics, and power have a very important and powerful role that they play in our world. And it is only when the voices of justice through activists and forums such as this are given voice and airtime that we start to think about things differently. The power that Morocco has and the way that Morocco has done dirty politics across the continent in order to hold their vote and their power from small countries to larger countries is absolutely sickening. And all of this information is available online, but people don't look for it. People are not looking for the information that actually is available and is there. Another big part of the problem is that a lot of the information that is available online is only either in French, in Arabic. It might be in Spanish if it comes from Western Sahara or the Sahrawi themselves, but not enough information is disseminated in other languages. And this is something as well that as activists, we must work on sharing information, those that can translating information, that this information is available online across language barriers. The other important issue is political will. Instead of rocking the political boat and doing something that is not very popular when it comes to decisions and standing on the side of Western Sahara, countries would rather turn a blind eye, gain economically, gain from the opportunity to do dirty business, but to do business nonetheless. There are endless, week in and week out, there are endless cases where, for example, the phosphates of Western Sahara are illegally being traded. that the import and export of agricultural produce, such as tomatoes, are being exported into European countries against previous judgments by the EU Court of Justice. And we need to stand up against these things, because it cannot be that we're still benefiting Morocco economically when this is the one place that it could hurt them. Also through tourism. Why are we not boycotting Morocco the way that we see other countries being boycotted because of occupation? And I think that this takes great political will, and it takes great strength, not only from activists, but more so from the leaders at the top, who have always just towed the line, who have done what is politically correct, instead of having political will to change the status quo and to unravel the injustice that we see continuing. And unfortunately, within systems such as the United Nations, the bureaucratic nature of these kinds of institutions need people inside of them who will stand up and undo the dirty work that has been done, not only just over a few months or even a few years, but unfortunately over decades.
Yes, I totally agree. And about what you said about that, we need to give information to other countries that they don't receive, or they don't have a lot of information in their own language available about Western Sahara. If we want to talk about the case of France, for example, as you have noticed, or as a lot of people did notice, France did not allow a lot of people to write about Western Sahara, and there were a lot of human rights activists that defend the Western Sahara issue inside France, and they have been attacked sometimes. How can you see, you as a human rights activist, how do you see the safeness of people that defending Western Sahara in some countries that they are against this defense? For example, for you in South Africa, or for me in Sweden, sure, we are free to say whatever we want because it's democratic countries. But there are other people that their country supports Morocco in the occupation of Western Sahara. And some of them, they will be kind of afraid to say what they think or to write about the subject. First, how can you, if I would ask you about value, or to guess how much human rights activists are safe, especially those who defend Western Sahara. For example, we saw lately Josie Butler, that she received the treatments of rape and killing from Moroccans because of her acts. Did you ever receive any treatments or not yet?
Oh, unfortunately, this is a very common tactic by the Moroccan regime. This is something that they're really good at. Not only do they use soft terror tactics like trolling you across social media, commenting on every single thing that you might say to give an opposite view. They are wonderful at trolling social media, at putting out, there's a word I'm looking for and I can't think of now, but making sure that almost fake news is constantly put out on platforms across the world. This is for sure what they do. But unfortunately, they have threatened me nonstop for many years, even in my own country. And this for me is so disgusting that in my country, where we have freedom of speech, where we have a democracy, where I have the right to say certain things, as in Sweden, that they would dare in my country to challenge me publicly on national TV, on primetime television. They will lie blatantly on TV when I sit next to, for example, the Moroccan Shah de Fair, who we had a huge fight on national TV in South Africa not so long ago. And I challenged him on so many of the things that he said were not true. He even had the cheek to say that the Sahrawi refugees do not exist. He said there are no such things as refugees. They are not there. And in the same interview, about 30 minutes later, he then went on to say, in fact, the Algerian government is locking the Sahrawi people up. And so he made so many lies that he contradicted himself in his lies. And I caught him out every single time. Didn't make me very popular with him or the Moroccans who are here. Yes, of course, they threaten me constantly in my country, and even when I have been abroad in other countries doing activist work on Western Sahara. But we have to stand firm. We need to remember, as with Jodie Butler, amazing work that is being done there. And it is unfortunate that the threat of activists who stand for justice and freedom and the dignity of the Sahrawi people would be threatened by people who do not understand that it is wrong to do what they're doing. It is painful that that is the legacy that they are committed to leaving behind. And this is something that they have to go to bed with at night, their own conscience. What they do will live in their conscience forever, and they will have to answer for what they have done. All I can say is that we stand on the right side of history, and in our lifetime, history will remember the solidarity, the strength of activism that we have worked towards, and that is as a collective community of activists from around the world. And we will have to answer to the Sahrawi children of generations to come that will not grow up in a free Western Sahara if we do not do everything that is possible to ensure their freedom. And so I want to just also mention, I say that, and now in the picture on the screen here, I see these children. These are my Sahrawi children. They're the children in the camps that are my children. I've adopted them many years ago. I've known every single one of them from the day they were born, and these are my children. And my promise to them is that in my lifetime, they will return home. And I will go to Western Sahara on the day that the new president is proclaimed and their freedom and democracy is given to them. And I will be there to share the stories of the struggle and the challenges that the great Sahrawi freedom fighters all over the world have fought for. We need to remember that dream, and we need to fight for that every single day, because it's these children who don't know a life of freedom, justice, democracy, and one where their human rights are respected. And so even though we're threatened, even though the Moroccans try to do dirty diplomacy when we're inside of the United Nations Human Rights Council, when we're doing activism work, no matter where we are, we have to stand strong, we have to pray, and we have to know that we're doing what is right. And in our lifetime, this situation must and will change because of the strength of the Sahrawi people and the way that they have stood steadfast to fight peacefully for justice and freedom.
Yeah, thank you so much for your work and about your help to Western Sahara. But since that, as you have mentioned, you in your own country, and you are not even Sahrawi, and you received a lot of treatments. Can you imagine the life of Sahrawi people that they are defending their country against Morocco? I'm not talking about people in unoccupied or refugee camps, because sure, they are free to say or to do whatever. We know they have their totally freedom, but I'm talking about people in unoccupied territories. Can you imagine the amount of treatment and the sufferings that they are living in under the occupation of Morocco?
It's very difficult to think about what they must go through. And it is a reminder that what we go through as activists in free countries, we can never compare the suffering and the torture. There's no justification for what Sahrawis everywhere in the world go through, most especially those in the occupied territory who will protest peacefully and land up in jail. Women who are threatened with rape, threatened with beating, who are beaten. The sick things that the Moroccans have done are unthinkable and unjust. And all I can say is that, I pray a lot. I pray a lot. And the Sahrawi people of course, they are in my prayers, but more so, I pray for the Moroccans, those that live under a regime where they cannot see justice, they cannot see right from wrong, one where their minds are so twisted that they don't even understand that what is going on is injustice beyond anything we can imagine. I pray for them because they are living under a torturous regime, under a kingdom that is not only destroying the Sahrawi people, but is destroying their own people too.
Yes, because democracy, when we talk about democracy, it's not only about Sahrawi culture, about Moroccan culture. Another question, there was recently an article in the Western Sahara Research Watch regarding how there have not been any Western Sahara products in Swiss shelves. The organization Terre des Hommes Schweiz pushed different grocery chains and educated the Swiss people about unethical products from Western Sahara. Can this be seen as a good way to really make a change for organizations internationally?
I think that this is absolutely wonderful news. I read the article earlier this week when it came out, and I was absolutely thrilled that this is actually the case. I would like to share that during apartheid South Africa, in the history of our country, during the most dark period of our history, there were people around the world that boycotted products that came from South Africa, that boycotted traveling to South Africa, playing sports games against South Africa. And this kind of sanctioning is incredibly important. And this is a show of strength and solidarity and is such a win for the people of Western Sahara. So my hope is just that more, more moves to do this on shelves across cities and countries, not only in Europe, but around the world, especially in Africa. If we could do this and show that kind of stop of economic trade with Morocco, if we could really put a halt on this kind of economic activity to show solidarity and strength with Western Sahara, these are the small things. They take great work, and behind the scenes are huge, to get to that point. But these are the things we need to see happening more and more. These are the things that will give a lot of attention to Western Sahara. They will get people asking questions. They will get people speaking. This is what we need more of. So it's a wonderful move. It was a wonderful article by Western Sahara Research Watch, and it's something that we need to see a lot more of.
Yes, and there's a question related to this news. How can we affect companies internationally to ban their products like they did in Switzerland?
Can I please ask you just to repeat that question?
How can we affect companies internationally to ban their products like they did in Switzerland?
I think that this is, again, an opportunity for activists and civil society. You don't have to be part of an organization in your country, but what you must and need to do, this is another space where we need to be active on the ground where we are. We need to write letters to the different retail companies, corporations, to our leaders, and we need to start to push. Find one retailer that is selling something that is Moroccan produce or something that's coming from Western Sahara, and let us share information as to what is going on in Western Sahara, why Morocco is an occupying power and a colonizer, and why we should not be selling their produce on our shelves. Find one retailer selling Moroccan goods and try and target them. Get leaders in your area or community to start to understand the situation and to stand behind the letter that you write, and get people to back that information which you're sharing. And don't give up. Constantly, it may take you 1 year, 2 years to do, but if you're constant, if you're deliberate, and you keep pushing on that one thing, you will get it right, because people cannot turn away to information that they now have, if they don't know, they won't do better. But if they have information and they can do better, it will be very difficult for them to say no to you after listening to you, after you pushing and pushing. And these are the small things that we can do in our communities to really, really strengthen the cause of Western Sahara.
Thank you about your answer. Here is another question from Kobalai. Beside advocacy, what should the movement do to achieve a direct intervention in stopping the Moroccan illegal occupation?
I think that no matter where in the world you are, you need to find out what is your country's stance. It is important to know that you live in a country that they believe X, Y, or Z. Whatever it is that your stance is as a nation, you need to find out what that is, and you need to then question and interrogate that. So, for example, if you're living in an African country or a country in Europe or Asia, wherever it is, that has a negative stance on Western Sahara in the sense that they do not support self-determination of Western Sahara, ask questions, find out why. Ask important questions to important people and use social media if you're able to. You need to remember that we all live in different countries with different frameworks. You need to be safe. Please don't go and put your life at risk by asking things on social media that you know you're not allowed to ask. If you live in a country that is not democratic, you need to understand the framework in which you're working. You're not good for the Sahrawi people if you land up in jail. So do things within the framework of where you are. Understand your own country's framework, but start to ask questions if you can. And start to write letters. Start to create an awareness. Use your social media platforms wherever you are to share information. It might be by later tonight when this interview is living on a Facebook page. Go and share it on your Facebook page. Share information with other people in your circle who know nothing. Do what you can from where you are. And it's the small impact that we can each have that has a greater value. So don't underestimate your Facebook page, which may have 10 people following it, or your Twitter account, which you may have 110 people following you there. You need to be focused on ensuring that you do what you can where you are and that you're always at the forefront of asking important questions. We can't always be the ones that change policy, but we can be the ones that push leaders who are elected in our community to push policy and to question that policy that we have. It's also important to understand that there are frameworks and there are certain international certain international frameworks in which we work as well. Learn as much as you can. Educate yourself. I'm very active on Twitter, and I try all the time to share information of things that are being shared from around the world on Western Sahara. And that is a channel. I may not be on mainstream TV tonight, but tonight I will use my platform to share information. Follow as many Sahrawi people who are activists and doing things. Amplify their voice. These are the things that we can do. We may, as individuals and as citizens, not be able to change policy, but we have the ability to push our leaders to change that policy.
Yes, and there is a comment from David. He wants to say that there is a lot of blame on leaders in Africa, which this idea, I totally agree with it. I mean that African leaders, they must be against any kind of colonization, because as I told you, from colonization, especially of France, either in direct way or indirect way by using Morocco, as you have mentioned. What do you think about that? And do you really agree with his own idea?
Look, there is no doubt that African leaders must be held accountable for the fact that for 47 years, the Sahrawi people have suffered. As a member of the African Union and previously the OAU, how is it that part of the preamble of the African Union Constitution, Morocco was readmitted almost 3 years ago back into the African Union with no terms and conditions, and has continued to exploit natural resources in the occupied Western Sahara. They continue to be a colonizing power. They continue to violate human rights and to torture Sahrawi people, even though they are a signatory on the Anti-Torture Declaration under the United Nations. How is it that these things are possible? African leaders must be held accountable. We have not done enough. We have failed as a continent to address an issue that is an African issue. So now we have to rely on international bodies such as the United Nations to assist us in unraveling the injustice that we have allowed to prevail on our watch. The African Union acts as a big dog with no teeth. Where is the political will to ensure a decolonized continent, one where our people are free and just, and one where we can prosper economically, socially, one where we can challenge other global regions from an economic perspective, a growth perspective, technology? How can we focus on all of those things when we have allowed colonization to continue on our continent? These must be the questions we ask our leaders. These must be the things that they are accountable to us as citizens for. But if we don't ask the questions, we will never receive the answers. We will never push them into a corner to address the issue of Western Sahara. And we will continue to only wait for international bodies such as the United Nations to eventually address a situation that they themselves have allowed to continue year after year to be deferred because of that veto vote of France on the UN Security Council.
Exactly. Since that you have mentioned the UN mission, it's at the same time of one of the comments from Hawaii. He said, as a young Sahrawi, we lost faith on the so-called UN peace plan in Western Sahara. We are now much more certain that the political plan in Western Sahara is leading to nowhere. What do you think about the UN mission in Western Sahara that did not, I don't know, I did not see any positive results, enough for 40 years, or I don't know how many years it's there.
I have to agree with you. I have to agree that the UN MINURSO, which is the peacekeeping force in Western Sahara, it has certainly failed. It has failed the Sahrawi people. It has failed. It has failed as a peacekeeping force that was initially mandated to bring about a referendum that was going to happen 6 months after the ceasefire in 1991. We're in 2020. And this has never come to light. Why? Because Morocco has been allowed to aggravate this very process. So we have to ask ourselves, if the United Nations has failed us, young Sahrawi people, both in the occupied territory, in the refugee camps, even around the world, are frustrated by a failed system that keeps promising them that things will change, that things will advance, that discussions will move forward, and none of these things happen. You cannot blame them for feeling despondent, angry. You cannot. So what are we supposed to do? The United Nations MINURSO is also, for those that may not know, is the only peacekeeping envoy in the world that does not monitor human rights. How is that possible? How do we have an entire UN peacekeeping force in a region that was at war and we don't monitor human rights? It is unthinkable. So this is a huge call for action. And this again is something else that activists around the world can call for, can ask for, can question. Why is it that we're not monitoring the human rights in occupied Western Sahara as we should? I don't have the solution or answer, but I understand and agree fully. Yes, the United Nations have failed in occupied Western Sahara. The peacekeeping force MINURSO has failed on their mandates, most especially to call for the referendum that was meant to happen after that promise in 1991.
Yes, and Muhammad has mentioned problem that is happening, especially in the unoccupied territories. He said, "I have a question for you, Catherine. As a human rights activist, what can you do for the Sahrawi police detainees to make their voice reach all the world, especially that recently a Sahrawi political detainee was subjected to a dangerous and a deadly attack in the prison. His name is Aziz."
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to ask you just to repeat that question. I can't see the questions myself, but could I ask you just to repeat that one, please?
Yeah, that's a question from Mohammed to you. He said, "You, Catherine, as a human rights activist, what can you do for the Sahrawi political detainees to make their voice reach all the world, especially that recently a political was subjected to a dangerous and deadly attack in the prison? His name is Aziz."
Okay, I'm not sure if it is the young political freedom fighter that was recently. I'm just trying to look. Just give me 1 second. Yes, Aziz, who was in front of the Buzarkan prison, which was now in the last week. It is important. So what I did, for example, when I heard about Aziz and what had happened, and this is a young man, I think he's a really young man, and this happened to him. It is important for us to share this information. So immediately I went, for example, to my Facebook page and I posted the entire story, what had happened, and a picture of Aziz, calling as I would ask for other activists to do so as well, to call for his immediate release, because the detainment of this political prisoner specifically is uncalled for, especially when it was a peaceful demonstration, and it is something that happened immediately. If we can react as much as possible to immediate action when these kinds of things happen, we must. About a year ago, 18 months ago, there was another gentleman, a political detainee by the name of Mohammed al-Bambari. Now, he was also put into prison and detained illegally against bogus charges. I wrote an entire article and opinion piece on Mohammed al-Bambari and asking, why is it that we don't know the hundreds and if not thousands of Sahrawis who are living behind political bars in prisons illegally in Morocco? And this article that I wrote was then translated into many languages around the world and was published quite widely and got a lot of attention from even international NGOs who started to take up his cause. So I think that as a human rights activist and human rights defender for Sahrawi political detainees and prisoners, we need to be on top of information, what is going on in the prison. And when something like what happened with Aziz in the last 2 weeks happens, let us add our voice, let us amplify the message and the information, and let us try and create a much awareness of it so that a release can happen. In the case of Aziz, this was the case. We need to be attentive and need to be connected to each other again to be able to do these kinds of things.
Yes, and as you have mentioned, anyone make any peaceful manifestation of this is going to prison, or even if someone published an article, and that's what I call it, that really life of human rights activists and journalists and anyone working in media is really in danger. Yes. How can we, I could say, keep them safe, because we are trying to keep ourselves safe as a human rights activist. Mm-hmm. But how can we help them either to not go to prison or stupid reasons like that? It means to occupy the country of someone and you punish him if he mentioned that's not logical. How can we help them, since that we are away in Morocco and we can't be in? How can we help the prisoners and the journalists and human rights activists to be more safe?
I think that it really goes back to something we chatted about earlier, we need to know the frameworks within which we work. We need to understand the context of our own democratic systems where we live. And like I said, an activist is no good to the Sahrawi people if we're behind jail bars ourselves. We need to be safe in understanding where we are, what we can and can't do, and work within that system. Because there's so much we can do, even if we know that we're living in a non-democratic country, if we know that our leaders in our country are with Morocco and not with Western Sahara. We need to be careful. Don't put yourself in unnecessary danger. And this is a reality. We unfortunately are dealing with thugs, with evil-minded people who do not understand humanity and solidarity, and do not understand justice, freedom, and human rights. So the monster that we're working with is huge, and it's evil, and it's dark, and it's very powerful. Let us not underestimate the power of the Moroccan regime. But what we must never forget is we stand on the right side of history, that we, with our Sahrawi brothers and sisters, will prevail. And democratically, we will see self-determination for the Sahrawi people. We must just work within the framework set out in front of us. Let us not do stupid things. Let us not allow for the Moroccans to turn around and judge misfooted steps that we have made. Let us do all we can to be conscious of what we can do and push working within those frameworks. I see a message now from Raha Kasim, and it's nice to see that you joined the conversation. Thank you, my brother. You know, he says this course has to go further, and we have to require lobbying of our individual countries with aggression and with power and with determination. And this is, in fact, what it is. So it's not only keeping ourselves safe, but ensuring that we never give up working within the framework of what we can do and what we're able to do.
And that's a question for you that I received on my personal phone. They said, you as a human rights activist and as someone that really know the situation in Western Sahara, how do you think, do you agree with the peaceful fight that Sahrawi people are using against Morocco, or it must be another, how he means like, because the question is in Arabic, he means like if they have to be really more serious about their fight and not use only the peaceful way, because as we can see, they are in peaceful, did not lead to anything.
I would assume that this question, the bottom line of this question is that he's asking if the Sahrawi, if it is my view, if the Sahrawi people should go to war because a peaceful process has not got them anywhere. Is this correct?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so my answer to that is, having lived in the refugee camps, unfortunately, I am not able to access the occupied territory because I'm banned by Morocco, so I cannot enter Western Sahara. But living inside the refugee camps, living with the Sahrawi people, engaging with young Sahrawi freedom fighters in different parts of the world and working with them for many years, I'm not blind by the fact that because blood is not spilt, the world's attention is not on Western Sahara. This is a reality. But what we must understand is that the strength of the Sahrawi people is endurance. And they have endured for so many decades to fight for a peaceful resolution for their people. I understand that young people are frustrated and believe that war is potentially the only way to get freedom. But we have to hang on. We have to stand firm in trying to believe that this peaceful endurance will eventually bear fruit. It doesn't feel like that because we've not seen the success that we've needed to see in so many years. But let us just hold on. Let us not put even the life of one Sahrawi at risk and lose one life just to get the world's attention. Eventually things will change. We have to believe that. We have to believe in the strength of the human spirit, and that Morocco's injustice and evil regime will eventually fail. They will eventually run out of resources to lie to the world. and eventually we will see the strength of the Sahrawi people come to fruition when we see them eventually go home. That is my prayer, and I understand the question of war. It's something we have discussed endlessly. Nights after night, we have sat, we have discussed it, we have dissected this, because this is a reality. But let us not even lose one life to war. Let us rather pray for freedom in a way that is just and that is given with dignity. I just want to also say that the Sahrawi people, no matter where in the world they are an incredible people. Their strength, their agility, their determination, no matter what has happened to them, no matter even those that have gone to war or have been prisoners, detainees, have been victims of torture, they continue to show strength beyond anything I've ever known. And so it is that I hold on to believe that eventually things will turn. It cannot be that a regime can go on forever. And history in my country has taught me that. So I hold on to the strength of human spirit to prevail over evil.
Yeah, I totally agree. Sahrawi people, sure, they will never forget about their case and about their country and about their families, that they are refugees in Algeria. As the refugees, they will not forget the Sahrawis, that they are under the Moroccan colonization and that they are suffering from going to prison and torture and all what you have mentioned. That was the last question, I guess.
Perfect.
Catherine, thank you so much about your time, and I'm really grateful and I'm really appreciate about all what you are doing for Western Sahara and for Sahrawis that I really, as you have mentioned, you consider them as your second nation, and it's the same thing for me. Thank you, Catherine, so much about your time, and it was really great to talk to you.
Jazakallah. Thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity and the platform, to you and your team for allowing me such a wonderful opportunity to Global Eye. Thank you so much, and to everyone who has come onto this live stream today. Let us all go and do what we can from our corners. Let us stand in the sand together with the Sahrawi people. Our brothers and sisters will go home in our lifetime. That will happen. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you, and have a nice day.
And you.
Adieu. Bye. Bye.